Hello and welcome to week 10 in research methods here. As we're chugging right along, I'm working with several of you right now as you are releasing your surveys and engaging in data collection, and this is exciting. Bumps in the road sometimes, and that is the way of the researcher. Some things don't go the way you want and you have to redo some work, and persistence. You will get this done, and I think everybody right now is doing pretty well. So I'm pretty excited about seeing some of the results of these studies that are going out. So here we are in chapter 11 talking about experiments. And one of the important things to recognize is right from the beginning of this class, and even in the discussions that we have had in statistics, that difference between experiments and correlations is and will always be focused on the essence of cause-effect relationships. Now, when we take two variables and we measure those variables as they occur, and we see that they vary together in some, either a negative correlation and one that goes up, the other one goes the opposite direction, or you have a positive correlation where they go up and down together, we recognize, I hope that's based in your DNA right now, that correlation does not implicate causation. So, how do we determine cause-effect relationships? Enter in experiments. Now, two kinds of experiments in general purposes. Right now we're talking about basically laboratory type experiments, and then the more common quasi-experiments, we'll be getting into those in next week. But experiments allow you to manipulate purposefully one of those variables, namely the independent variable, where you're controlling for that. You're minimizing what the focus is. You're going to say this group is getting this condition, this group is getting this condition, and you measure if there's any differences in the outcome. That is a classic experimental style. Of course, it gets more complex. You can have more than one variable, more than one independent variable, more than one dependent variable. But the key is we're manipulating the independent variable. We are choosing where that goes. That is that experimental design that says, I'm going to take this group that has the independent variable at this level, this person in this group, independent variable at that level, and I'm going to measure the differences between them. That is how we get closer to cause effect, because we're not just measuring if there's a relationship, we're actually measuring the impact of the presence or absence or the level of a particular variable on the outcome. So we're getting closer, never really proving that sort of outside of the scientific area within psychology, but providing evidence to support our hypotheses that we say, yes, not only are these variables related to each other that we determined when we did our correlation, but I believe one may directionally cause or influence the outcome of the other. Now, these get complex in that kind of dichotomy of cause-effect is not always how reality works. Oftentimes, there are other variables that come into play that also affect, but we're focusing on one. So oftentimes we control for all those extraneous variables by holding these things in a lab. So everybody's in the same place, they get the same instructions, they get the same person, they get the same stimuli, kind of controlling all those other factors that might influence the outcome and focusing simply on that one independent variable that I'm trying to figure out. So these kinds of contrived experiments, many of which you can explore in the site toolkit, many of you can explore in those other resources on available online research that's going on. Some of them are experiments. And so to see that kind of difference between the manipulation of the independent variable versus just measuring the independent variable and how it relates to another dependent variable. So there's a kind of a key place, and we'll talk a little bit about quasi-experimental next week, but here we are in, actually it's not next week, I just looked at my notes, we're doing both of these this week, sorry about that, both chapter 11 and 12. So the discussion is, what is the notion of the manipulating of the independent variable? How does that help us to determine cause-effect relationships? Boy, I think I just said the answer a while ago. So we'll just discuss that. And then the quiz is to look at some famous studies. Might be very obvious in the description of those studies, but you're looking at those famous studies, and I want you to tell me which study it was, of course, but tell me what was the independent variable, the one that got manipulated, and what was the dependent variable, the one where they were searching the impact of that independent variable on the dependent variable, to be able to identify those within a study. So that's going to be that. Now, a little bit of a present for you. I have decided that we are not going to do chapter 11 assignment. You have enough on your plate. I really like the idea of doing this, but I'm going to let it go for the summer. Probably just have people do it when we've had 16 weeks to get all this done. But skip chapter 11 assignment. This might be a really cool indicator as to actually who watches these videos. So that is my clue to you who are been watching these videos. Do not do chapter 11 assignment. Skip right over that. Go into chapter 12, quasi-experimental method or design. This particular method is just like experimental, but one difference. We cannot randomly assign subjects to the independent variable groups. They just are. So, things that happen like this are often when we want to do experiments in the natural setting. So, if I wanted to do an experiment on the utility of using slideshows to support my lecturing class, I would probably choose 2 sections of psychology, and I would say one section is going to get slides, the other one's not, and I'm going to compare, but I wasn't able to randomly assign people to those groups. They assigned themselves when they signed up. So the very fact that I was not able to randomly assign is what makes it quasi-experimental. Also, a big subset of experiments that are all quasi-experimental design is any experiment where a quality of the individual is the independent variable. Anything that you're looking at that compares gender, male, female, or other, if that's your independent variable, you can't randomly assign that. So therefore, you're stuck with who it is, right? Looking at other things like intelligence or people from Maine versus people from Vermont. You can't just randomly assign people to Maine and Vermont. You have to take Mainers and Vermonters and take them like they are, whoever's there. What it introduces is a level of error. So you have true experimental, it's trying to control for everything, has a certain amount of potential error. Then you have quasi-experimental when you're looking at existing formulated groups of individuals and you're comparing them. But you have not had any role into who's a member of that group. That's quasi-experimental. If you're going to compare Harley drivers to Honda drivers, or rich to poor, or Republicans versus Democrats versus independents, all of that. And as you can see, as I'm saying these things, you're looking at all these different variables that we explore in psychology. A lot of them can only be explored through quasi-experimental method because we cannot actively assign our subjects to the independent variable group. That only happens in true experiments. So, in the discussion and in the course book, I talk about these kinds of studies that were done, like in college students. I mean, there's lots and lots of research that it's been done and published and created a sense of knowledge in psychology that has been based on, first, college students, second, non-randomized group assignment, quasi-experimental method, and could that lead us astray? Could we make assumptions about the human experience because we have this preponderance of evidence based on quasi-experimental as opposed to... Now, the interesting thing is what we do find out is personal qualities, especially gender, race, age, and whatnot, when we actually study those experimentally, or when we look at those things, there's way more diversity. We oftentimes find way more diversity within the group than between the groups. Like if you have men, women, and other, there's more diversity within the men than there is between men, women, and other. So there's actually there's usually not a whole lot of differences between those. The studies really start to indicate that we're all pretty much the same, and that those particular factors, when we actually use them as the independent variable, don't produce a whole lot of diversity. There are, of course, studies, the female wired brain and the male wired brain, whether that's biology or socialization is still, nature versus nurture, that's still up there, some consistent changes, but usually we find out there's really not a whole lot going on there. Usually other factors that have been involved in the kind of the differences that we might see in those particular groups. Now, so that's the discussion, is to discuss what's the potential impact. How could that bias our view of the world if a whole bunch of studies that we've relied upon to explain the human condition were based on this quasi-experimental design? The second one, there we go. Kind of talked about it in this lecture already. The true experimental variable, the true independent variable versus the quasi-experimental independent variable. That's a bad phrase right there. What's the difference? Compare and contrast those. I think I've already said the answer to that one in this lecture too. So those of you who are watching the videos, you're getting all this key information, including do not do Chapter 11 assignment. I'm just going to give hundreds to everybody because it's already embedded in the grading system. So everybody gets a free one on that. So I know you're all busy getting your research data, getting your survey ready. That everything really should be at the data collection at least by next week. And so I know that I'm meeting with some of you soon, and we're going to get these things going. There's a couple people that are already collecting their data, and that is great. And kind of an exciting time here these last 2 weeks going in. I will say I will be on the road. Won't be on the road. I'll be in the air flying to Idaho on Wednesday for a show. And it's a far place to go for a show. And so I'll be leaving Wednesday morning and not coming back until Friday. However, I will have my phone. I'll even have my laptop. I do work while I'm in boring flights and road trips. So I'm not completely away, but certainly for periods of time you might not hear right back from me. Try to be as responsive as I can, particularly when you're getting your studies ready here. So send your messages anyway. I'll get to them eventually. And have a great week. It is hot as heck outside. And my next activity today is to go weeding. I might change my mind. But have a great week. Get the stuff done. It's an exciting time in the class. And I will see you in the online discussions. So have a great week.